It has been said from time to time that well-behaved women rarely make history. And you know what? I agree with that statement. So let's take a look at what history has to say about the behavior of one Miss Kate Warne. There's not much we know about Kate's early life. We know that she was born in Erin, New York, around 1833, and that she was already widowed by the age of 23. It was 1856 when Kate responded to a job advertisement for a detective agency, the Pinkerton Detective Agency, no less, that history truly begins to take notice of her. Naturally, Pinkerton didn't want to hire her because it is not the custom to employ female detectives. Kate disagreed. She argued the merits of women's observational skills and eye for detail until Pinkerton finally hired her as his first female detective. In 1858, Kate was able to work on the Adams Express Company embezzlement case. The prime suspect was Mr. Maroney, who worked as an expressman in Montgomery, Alabama. By befriending Maroney's wife, Kate was able to prove the theft of $50,000 and helped return $39,515 of it. Maroney spent the next 10 years in jail. And in 1860, Kate was promoted as the female superintendent of detectives to lead the new female detective bureau of the Pinkerton Agency based out of Chicago. She would go on to recruit such amazing women as Elizabeth H. Baker and Hattie Lawton to work for the agency. On 3rd February 1861, Kate and 4 other detectives were sent to Baltimore, Maryland, to investigate secessionist activities after the Pinkerton Agency was hired by Mr. Samuel H. Felton, president of the Philadelphia-Wilmington Railroad, to investigate threats. The investigation uncovered an assassination plot against the then president-elect Abraham Lincoln. This would later become known as the Baltimore Plot. Disguising herself as a wealthy Southern lady visiting Baltimore, Kate took on the aliases of Mrs. Cherry and Mrs. M. Barley and adopted a thick Southern accent in order to infiltrate the social circles of the secessionists in the Baltimore area. In this way, she was able to verify the plot to assassinate Lincoln and acquire details of how the assassination was to occur. At that time, all trains traveling south had to connect in Baltimore, and the plotters intended to assassinate Lincoln at the time of his travels to Washington to take the oath of the presidency. Lincoln decided he liked his schedule, though, and kept to it. It wasn't until 5:45 on the night of February 22nd those plans deviated. John George Nickel, Mr. Lincoln's private secretary, excused the president-elect from a dinner party, and they left in disguise. Pinkerton, a disguised Lincoln, and Lincoln's bodyguard, Ward Hill Layman, met Kate at the train station, where she acted like Lincoln was her brother. Kate had provided the disguises which allowed Lincoln to pass through Baltimore without being recognized on the overnight train ride. The Pinkerton Detective Agency motto is "We never sleep." It's believed that came from Kate's guarding of Lincoln that night. Kate often played Pinkerton's wife while undercover, and she had many aliases. Her work did not stop following the Civil War, and she continued training new agents as they were recruited. Part of Kate's biggest contribution to women's history was simply her employment by Alan Pinkerton. It wasn't until 1891 that women were even allowed to join the police force, and not until 1908 that they were allowed to be officers. Many of the Pinkerton records were lost in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Therefore, we have lost many of the records of Kate's past. Some have also speculated that we have so little documentation because she was such a good spy. On the 28th of January, 1868, Kate was buried at Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. It's estimated she was 35 years old, and records state that she died of congestion of the lungs, which today we would call pneumonia. Her grave lies within the Pinkerton family plot, and by the terms of Alan Pinkerton's will can never be sold or disturbed. An Ohio obituary from 1868 described her as the best female detective in America, if not the world. The Pinkerton Detective Agency has called her a source of inspiration for their history, and still others have called her a trailblazer for women that protect the president and work for the Secret Service. During her life, Kate Warne was a daughter, a wife, a widow, a detective, and a spy. Criminals to justice, helped stop the assassination of the president, and trained others to follow in her footsteps. If this is what history calls bad behavior, then I don't know about you, but I aim to misbehave.